Hello everyone, this is Walter from Creative Media Vault, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build your own website using WordPress so that you can display and advertise your own original creative works. So what you're looking at right now is one of the websites that I built quite a while ago for my project Wildfire, and this is basically just my free zone to post content, post artwork, and basically promote myself online. So as you can see, this website has links to my online comic series, the Flash animated TV series that I have that I'm working on. Also, it has some links to the main storyline and the novel that you can download from the iTunes Store. It also has links to some of my games, my board games, as well as some information about the new mobile game that I'm creating as well. So creating your own website actually gives you a lot of freedom for what you can do and what you can advertise. You can even post videos about your work on here. So I'm going to be showing you how to create something similar to this during this tutorial series. So a lot of creative people tend to think that building a website is something very difficult and very complicated. So I actually meet with a lot of talented individuals like musicians, artists, people who like even write stories or create video games. And like, they have a lot of good work. But a lot of times when I ask them, I'm like, hey, where can I find like samples of your work online? Where can I check out what you're doing? A surprising amount of them don't actually have a website set up. And so I asked him, I'm like, well, why don't you have a website? And a lot of times they think that it's very difficult or very complicated to set up a website. So I hear excuses like, well, I don't have time to set up a website, or it's going to take a lot of money that I don't have right now to pay somebody to build something good for me, or I'm not going to have time to maintain it. So the impression is that building a website is something that's very difficult to do. And so I'm going to show you that it's really not, and it doesn't really take a lot of cash. So one of the main focuses of this tutorial series that I'm working from right now is that I do realize creative people often have to kind of split their priorities. So we're always kind of stuck in the middle of working on our creative projects or trying to pay bills. Unless you're in a very good position to where you can actually work on both, it tends to be a bit of give and take on either side. So one of the main focuses of this tutorial series is I'm going to try to start you working from the bottom up to where with something that doesn't require a lot of financial investment and something that you can build to just go ahead and start getting your work out there online to where people can start viewing it and seeing what you're working on. And from there, you can start building revenue streams connected to your own creative works. So that's the angle that we're going to be approaching this from. Now, I don't want to make this video too long, so we're just going to jump right into it. In order to start creating your own website, there are a few things that you're going to need. But before I go into what you're going to need to build your own website, I do realize that there are some good online free website builders that a lot of people like to use. And for example, here's a good one. This is a popular one in Japan. It's called Wix. So this is a free online website builder that has a lot of templates for you to use to start building a website and get your stuff up and running very quickly. Now, don't get me wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using one of these if you're like really, really pressed for time and you don't know how to build a website, or you don't have any programming experience or whatnot. So this is a very good option for you to just go ahead and start displaying and dumping a lot of your content on in order to start maybe getting fans or subscribers to what you're building. However, there are some very big disadvantages to using sites like these. For example, Wix will let you sell content and they will let you advertise, but it's fairly limited what you can actually do on the site because you kind of have to go by their rules and regulations and what they will allow you to do. So, for example, you don't really have complete ownership of the site itself. Even the content that you post, you don't really have complete ownership of that either because, for example, since you're using their platform, they might have very good support and they might have a lot of good benefits, such as already being prepared to handle SEO. But if you post content on here on their platform that they don't really like or agree with, well, basically they can ask you to remove it because they hold ownership over what is posted on their site, right? And they also have like a certain amount of liability for that. So they can lock your account, they can delete your account if they really don't like it, or if they happen to get bought out by a competitor, there are many different ways where you can actually lose access to what you've already got on here, right? It rarely happens, but the fact of the matter is, once you start posting your content on one of these sites, basically, you start losing a little bit of the additional control that you would have with your if you were just running your own site. Now, one concept that I want you to keep in mind throughout this entire process while we're building your website is I want you to think of your own website as real estate. So think of it as buying land because that's going to be your starting point, right? So making your own website is like having your own land, and you can build whatever you want to on it. So you could build like a hotel, you could build an apartment complex, or if you have enough money, you could even build an amusement park. So it doesn't matter what you build, and nobody can tell you what you can or can't put on it because, well, you own the land, right? However, regardless of what you build, it doesn't really matter if you don't have any traffic flowing to your website. So if you have good land and you have a great hotel or a great apartment building or amusement park, it doesn't really make any difference if you don't have any people who are actually visiting these places, right? So that's one key concept that I want you to keep in mind while we're going through this entire process. But before we can start talking about how people are going to visit your site, we first have to, well, build your site, right? So as I mentioned, I'm going to be showing you how to set up something like this. I'm not going to give you a demo on how to recreate this entire site. Rather, I'm just going to go over the basics of WordPress installation and WordPress setup so that you get a general idea of how to create a site similar to this. And then I want you to naturally branch out and start building your own to kind of find a style that matches your creative project, right? And I think that's the way that it should work. Now, to get started building a website, you're going to need a few things. And as I mentioned before, one of the key points for this tutorial series is I want to try to get you started with as little financial investment as possible. So for all of the tutorials that I'll be creating from here on out, the words free and cheap are things that we love. However, unfortunately, you are going to have to invest a little bit of money at the very beginning just to get started, right? And this is very important. So the first thing that you're going to need when it comes to building your own website is you are going to need web space, right? So you're going to need web space, and you're going to have to get that from a service provider. So this is the service provider that I've been using for the past 10 years. They're called lunarpages.com. And I've been using them because, well, they have pretty good packages and pretty good prices for web space and domain names. Also, I've never really had any major problem with using them, and anytime a problem does pop up, they notify me immediately, and it's normally resolved within like a day or so, a maximum. But they do keep in contact with you throughout, so their support is actually pretty good here. But this is the service provider that I've been sticking with and that I run all of my websites from. So your initial investment that you're going to need to get started in all of this is to purchase web space. And like I said, they have some pretty good packages starting at $4.95 per month. But of course, there are many other options online. So I recommend like shopping around a little bit, checking to see what some of your local service providers might have to offer. They may have better deals. But either way, it is very important that you go ahead and purchase your own web space. Now, saying that, it's not necessary for you to go out and immediately buy like 30 gigabytes or 50 gigabytes of web space. You don't need that right now. So, as a matter of fact, I would recommend that you start off with the best package possible, which will probably be around like 10 gigabytes or 25 gigabytes at first, until you learn how to build a website. And so make your investment as small as possible in the beginning because you can always upgrade your plans later. Right, so once you have found a service provider and you decide to purchase one of the packages or your web space, then the next thing that you're going to need is a domain name. Now, domain names are very important, but a lot of times your hosting provider will give you the option to buy a domain name, to purchase the domain name as part of your package. Some providers do this. I think most providers do this. Some of them don't. So, but your domain name is actually one of the most important decisions that you will ever make when it comes to building your website or marketing and promoting your future product. And this is something that I completely did not know about at first, and I completely screwed a couple of attempts at building websites because I chose the wrong domain name. So, a good example of this is my previous domain name. The name of my book is called Wildfire: Legend of the Ryukage. That's the name of the original novel that's on the iTunes store, right? And I thought it was a pretty cool name. So the first domain name that I purchased was ryukage.com, named after my book, right? Because I thought it was going to be cool. However, what I did not know and what I didn't consider at the time is how many people are actually going to search Ryukage, the keyword Ryukage. Well, it turns out nobody. Um, that's because it's a very unusual word. It means dragon shadow in Japanese, but nobody's going to search that, right? So if you bring up a search bar and you type in Ryukage, well, if you notice, there's a few entries there, but let's check out the images. So there is quite a few images on here, but only about 20% of them are related to my website because I've been using that keyword for like over 10 years now. So like this is one of mine, this is one of mine. So yeah, I'd say about a good 20-25% of these are mine. But the rest of them have absolutely nothing to do with my website, and it's all just random stuff. So when it comes to choosing your domain name, it's very important that you choose something that is relevant to, of course, relevant towards your project and towards the original works that you're creating. You're also going to want to include keywords that are searchable, like stuff that people will naturally type in every day, right? So I would have gotten more hits to my website if I had had something like Ryukage comic or maybe Ryukage anime or something like that, because the keywords comics and anime, comics and anime, are everywhere on the internet, right? So it would have been smarter for me to include a keyword like that in my domain name than just leaving it as Ryukage. I didn't know that before, but it's a very common mistake that new website builders make when they're creating their first site. So I want you to try to avoid that. So your first homework assignment is to take a few minutes and start writing down some domain names, that are relevant to your work and something that is a little bit more Google friendly. I wouldn't recommend starting to build your website until you have a good domain name down, because that is going to impact the way that you build your site. So if you're having trouble finding a domain name, what you can do is you can always go to, let's see, namecheap.inc. And here you can actually do some searches on domain names. So for example, I can type in like a matchsticks. I spelled that one wrong. So I could type in like matchsticks.com if I have a hobby of collecting matchsticks from different places all over the world or whatnot. And I can do a search. Namecheap will actually tell me if matchsticks.com is open, which is not. Somebody already beat me to it. And then it'll give me a few other options as to domain names that are open that have the title Matchsticks in them, right? And it also lists the prices for these, right? So you can actually purchase a domain name from here if you like, and then port it over to your hosting provider later. But really, really take some time to think about your domain name. Like I said, it's very important. All right, so we've established that the first two things that you'll need are one, web space, two, a domain name. The third thing that you will need is an FTP program. So the one that I've been using for quite some time is FileZilla. This is a free downloadable FTP service, and they have downloads for each OS and each platform. So if you're a Windows user, you can download the Windows version. It really doesn't care, because the file that you're going to be downloading is going to be in, for this project, it's going to be in zip format anyway. So I recommend going to filezilla.com, downloading this, and going ahead and installing it, because you're going to need it later. Now I'll be teaching you how to build your own website using WordPress. So you can download WordPress by going to wordpress.org. Don't go to wordpress.com, that's the online version. You want wordpress.org, and you can just download it here. Now this is going to download as a zip file, so you can just go down here and press download WordPress, and this will be the latest version. So it's going to download as a zip file or tar.gz, and it's a very small download, so it won't take that long. And this is what we're going to use to build your new website. Now, the good thing about WordPress is that it's free and it's very easy to use and very quick to set up. And what many people are completely unaware of that is that a lot of major companies use WordPress for their sites for some very, very good reasons. Basically, by downloading this, you'll have access to a lot of the tools and stuff that the big businesses use to drive traffic to their website and be successful online. Alright, so the WordPress download should be completed, I believe. And now we can go ahead and get started with installing and setting up WordPress. Now, in order to get started with installing WordPress, you'll first need to upload it to your hosting server. The way I do this is by using the FTP program FileZilla. So once you've installed FileZilla, go ahead and open it up. And you will need to, do some settings in here. Now, this information is your FTP information. So you should have already received an email from your hosting provider with this information, like your host IP address, your username, and your password, stuff like that. So once you have all of this information, you can just kind of drop it in here, and then click connect, and this will connect you to the back end of your hosting server. So now that WordPress has been downloaded, what we'll need to do is we will need to upload this to the file server on our hosting provider, and that will begin the install for us. So to do that, we should first find the file that's been downloaded. So this is WordPress 4.75, which is a zip file, and they normally come as a zip or tar, which is one of the zip files that I've downloaded for this before. And then you can unzip it and you will get a folder that says WordPress, basically. So I have quite a few of these that I've downloaded just for different purposes already. And I have many folders because I've downloaded this a few times over the past couple of days to install some test sites, right? So once you have extracted everything to this folder, then what you can do is you can open up FileZilla. Now, to FTP your new WordPress installation onto your file server, what you first need to do is you'll need to make sure that you are under the correct folder. So if WordPress is going to be installed to the root of your domain, which it should be by default, so you'll probably have you'll be installing it probably to a folder called public_HTML. So this would be the root of my domain name. And so I would do my initial WordPress install from here, and then later, if I want to add different WordPress installs for like a store or for an online store or something like that, then I can actually create folders under this to do different WordPress installations. But for right now, we're going to focus on installing the main WordPress site. So to get started with the install, basically what I'll need to do is I'll need to find the WordPress file that I just downloaded and unzipped to my hard drive. And I'll just use this one now because I've downloaded WordPress quite a few times. Now, what I tend to do before I upload to the server is I tend to rename these folders. So, for example, I'll call this one WordPress tutorial, WordPress Toots. Yeah, I'll rename this one to WordPress Toots on my hard drive. And then I want to make sure that I'm uploading it to the root of my domain. So I will go ahead and right click, and then I can click upload. And this process is going to take a little bit of time. So just kind of let it run. If you'll notice, there's quite a few files being transferred over. And of course, you want to make sure that they're being transferred to the highlighted folder. That would be your root. So this file transfer is going to take a little bit of time. So I'm going to pause the video until this is finished running, and then I'll show you how to continue with the setup from there. While WordPress is installing to your file server, we can kind of go ahead and move on to one of the other key things that you will need to get your new website started, and that is going to be a database. So while the WordPress directory is uploading to your server, what we can do is we can move on to the next step, which is database. So when you signed up with your hosting provider, you should have gained access to Control Panel, right? This is standard for most hosting providers, and basically you're going to need this because this is where you're going to run all of your admin functions from. So you would log into your site using the login and password that they provided to you by email, and then you would just click on Control Panel, And this would take you to a screen that looks something like this, to where you could actually go to your cPanel. And so what we're going to be looking for is MySQL databases. So you're going to kind of just click on this, and this will help you create a database, which you'll use to link to your new website. So I'm not going to get into explaining like how databases work so much, but basically the best way to remember it is that anything that is written to your website will be stored on your database, pretty much. So this is where you're going to keep like user records, like blog entries and stuff like that will be stored to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new database, and let's see, I'm going to name it like Toots Test. Yeah, I'm just going to create a base named Toots Test, and I'll create it here. And then after it's been successfully created, I can just kind of go back. And after I've created my database, well, I'm going to need to create a user that can access this database. So I'm going to create a new user called, what am I going to call this guy? Either way, I'm going to delete this as soon as this tutorial is finished. So I'm going to name it Toots Test 005. I didn't pick up my other 0 and the 5. What's up? Toots Test. I guess it doesn't like that one. Toots Test 2. Okay, I'll just name it Toots Test 2. And at this point, I can actually type in a password, or I can have a password generated for me. I'm just going to type in something simple. And it's very important that you remember what this password is, because you'll be using it in a few minutes. Alright, see if I can remember this. Alright, yeah, that should be it. And then I'll go ahead and create a user. And I don't have to save this. It always asks me that. Right, so I've created a new database, and I've created a user that can access this database. But, however, right now there's no connection between these two. So, and this is a very important step. Make sure that you go down and add this user to the database. So what I'm basically going to do here is I'm going to find the user that I just created, which is TootsTest2, and I'm going to add him to the new database that I've just created, which is TootsTest. I'll click the Add button, and then I need to give TootsTest2, the user, the appropriate privileges to be able to access and read and write to this database. So the easiest way to do that is to select all privileges and make changes. And I'll get a message that says you have successfully granted privileges in the database to this guy, right? And that's basically what I'm looking for. Alright, so now let's check to see if our WordPress upload is finished. Alright, okay, there's no more files moving here. Files transferred, there's no failed transfer. So it looks like everything is good to go. I'm going to refresh my view on the FTP application, and there you go. So I have my WordPress toots here, and it has successfully been written to the back end of my hosting provider. Now, how do I access this and how do I set it up? If you are installing WordPress to the root of your hosting provider, then the easiest way to access it is to just type in your domain name. So for example, I would go, my root domain name is creativemv.com. And this will take me to my default WordPress installation that I have running. So as you can see, this is my main site because I already have WordPress installed here. Right, so this is the site that you're looking at. But what I've done is I've actually installed WordPress under another folder. So I've installed it under WordPress Toots. WordPress Toots. So in your case, it should just be the default domain name. In my case, because I've installed it into a subfolder, then this is what I'm looking at. And after you've typed in your domain name, this is the page that you should be looking at. So I'm going to do my WordPress installation in English. And after I've selected the language, it gives me this nice little screen here, which basically tells me all of the things that I will need to set up my WordPress. So I'll need a database name, which we just created. I'll need a database. Uh, I'll need a database username, which we also just created, and a database password. And these other two we'll go over when we're actually doing the installation. So I can click Let's Go here. I can type in the database name, and then I can type in the database username that I just created, as well as the password. And for these last two, if you're doing a new, fresh WordPress install, you can just leave these as they are. So database host will be localhost, and the prefix you can change it if you want to, but I would recommend just leaving it like this for now. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in the rest of this information, and then we can go ahead and get started setting up your site. All right, so after you've entered in the correct information, you'll get a screen that looks like this that says, all right, Sparky, you've made it through this part of the installation. WordPress can now communicate with your database. If you're ready, time now to run the install. And it runs very quickly, so it actually runs very quickly. And this is basically where you're going to start filling in information about your website. So I'm going to name this website tutorial. Yeah, I'm going to name it tutorials. Or actually, I'm going to name it something cool like CMV tutorials. Yeah. And don't worry, you can change all of this later. The username, I'm going to, then I'll fill in my username and my password. So I'm going to fill in all of this information. And you'll also fill in your default email address that you'll be using to basically administer this account. So I'll type in, like, for example, so I'll type in, so for example, I'll type in this one at AOL.com, right? And when I set my site up, basically anything that happens to the site or any admin function that, or anything administratively that needs to be done to the site, I'll receive the email to this account, right? So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and then I'll show you what your site actually looks like. So I've entered in the correct login and password and email address, and this is the next screen that pops up. And it's going to tell me to log in just to kind of confirm everything. And welcome to your WordPress dashboard. So when you log into it, it automatically brings you to your WordPress dashboard. And I know a lot of you are looking at this like, what is this? This is not what a website looks like. And you are correct. This is only the dashboard. So this is where you'll perform a lot of your setup, installations, configuring the appearance and the look of your site. But if you actually want to see what your website looks like now, then you can just simply click up here and go to Visit Site. And this is what your website currently looks like. So yeah, you have successfully installed WordPress. So that's it. You now have your own website. So what I'll be showing you in the next video is how to change the look of this website and how to make it look cool, and so that you can start adding, so that you can customize it to where you can start adding your own original content and start displaying it in a way that is, number one, visibly appealing to yourself, but can also start attracting viewers and visitors to your site.